This episode of New Politics was released on the 11th of April, 2026, and produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal people.
David, we've always said that war is good for nothing. There was actually a song written about it. There's actually been quite a few songs written about all of this stuff, but there's one person who's now currently paying the price of war, and that's Ben Roberts-Smith, and he's been arrested and charged on 5 counts of war crimes, and the opinions so far, well, they've all been split down political lines. Pauline Hanson is absolutely disgusted about these charges. The unelected and unaccountable and unrepresentative swill of Gina Rinehart, where she says that she doesn't understand this arrest over alleged war crimes. But coming a little bit closer, Gina, listen in. Murder, war crimes, not good. Now, I've simplified that to 5 words so you can hopefully understand that. Now, Kerry Stokes is probably upset that he spent so much money trying to defend this guy. It's around $30 million in legal fees and all of that. But the upshot is that Ben Roberts-Smith has been charged and arrested over 5 counts of murder. Now, it's not a case of all is fair in love and war. The murder of civilians in a war zone is still murder, and it's still a war crime. And based on all the defamation cases that he's taken up and lost, and the evidence that has been there presented by his former SAS colleagues, well, Ben Roberts-Smith is not a very pleasant man. But you don't go to jail for being an unpleasant man, but you do go to jail if you've murdered innocent civilians. Doesn't matter where it is in the world. And it's up to the court of law to decide whether he's guilty or not. It's not up to Pauline Hanson or Gina Rinehart or Craig Kelly or Kerry Stokes, all of his supporters. It doesn't really depend on his opinion. It doesn't depend on opinions from his supporters. It all comes down to the facts of law, and we'll find out what happens in this court case whenever it arrives.
Yeah, innocent until proven guilty, I think we have to remember that. Everything is, even though it came out in the courts, it was a civil trial where the burden of proof is much lower. Till we see the result, we cannot state that legally he is guilty. I think that's got to be said. The evidence against him, though, is pretty strong. That court case, the civil court case, his own defamation, if he came in halfway through or even came in at the beginning, you'd think that he was the one being put on trial, but he was the one prosecuting. And the fact that these regiments tend to close around each other. So the fact that the men he served with were coming out and openly saying, this is what he did, this is why he did, and he's not a very pleasant person, this is how he treated me. Normally what would happen is that they'd go through the court case, everyone would deny seeing anything, and I don't know, I can't remember, and you'd get off, and then you'd be punished by your regiment through ostracism, maybe through being cornered in the back of the mess and left in a pile there to think about what you'd done, transferred out, demoted, all of that. The fact that they let the system hit into him shows at least how guilty they thought he was and how poor they thought the behaviour was. Now, the fog of war argument comes through, and it's one thing if you're a serving soldier and the adrenaline's pumping and you're in station and you hear a rustling and you know that there are enemy soldiers around and you fire at the rustling and the rustling turns out to be an innocent civilian and you kill them and you had no intention of killing civilians, and that's fog of war stuff. This was deliberate. We're going to blood you. A terrible phrase. They take the guy to the top of the hill and he kicks him down the hill, allegedly. This is not a combination of fear and adrenaline made me make a judgment call that turned out to be wrong. And I'm not saying that's a right action anyway, but that's a thing that many serving soldiers have had to think about. What if I shot the wrong person? In this case, and of course, Kerry Stokes is trying to protect his investment in the Victoria Cross he bought off Ben Roberts-Smith. There's that level of right-wing, and it's not all right-wing people, who want to see us Anzac Day as how John Howard framed it as isn't Australia the best place in the world? And that if we start holding people to account democratically, how can we do that if we've got a war criminal as a Victoria Cross holder? That doesn't fit in. So there's that thing. There is, of course, as you pointed out, the racism thing. There were
Oh, well, I think
movements.
that's the really big thing because a lot of these perspectives that have been coming out from the right is basically a hotbed of racism. They're not concerned about the murder or the alleged murder of 5 Afghani civilians, and they had nothing to do with the war. They didn't cause it. They were just
They weren't even part of the infrastructure of the
right.
other.
But you're getting all these people who were more concerned about the white guy who was the national hero. He was Australian Father of the Year. He received the Victorian Cross. He's got his portrait set up, or did have his portrait set up in the National Gallery as well. Now, just because you might be a war hero, you got your Victoria Cross, well, that doesn't mean that you're immune from war crimes. You don't go off to war and shoot everything inside. I think a lot of people think that's what happens in war, but there are rules of engagement. And sure, there are terrible things that happen in war. And you talked about the fog of war before, David. Things do not always go to plan. They rarely go to plan. So let's give Ben Roberts-Smith his day in court. And he's had quite a few of those over the past few years with those various defamation cases. But for the right, as you mentioned, David, for the right, they've got this weird sense of nationalism. It's a bit like that Anzac legend. We want to have that glorified and untarnished
And it's
image.
not all the right either. The YouTuber who calls himself the Sloan Zone pointed out that Andrew Hastie was actually the person who reports Robert Smith and has been critical of Robert Smith as deputy leader of the Liberal Party. This is extraordinary. And Sloan pointed out, One Nation nearly get to the point where they're the opposition and they're going to die on the hill of Ben Roberts-Smith, whereas the Liberal Party, at least segments of the Liberal Party, are prepared to acknowledge that if the courts find him so, he's a war criminal. We find ourselves in a strange situation. But yeah, One Nation, having got so close to actually tasting political power, also responsibility, are going to hang themselves to the hat rack of a war criminal. Now, again, there may be some circumstance where he gets off, but I don't think there is. I think that the evidence so far is overwhelming.
Well, we'll see how the day in court goes for Ben Roberts-Smith, but there's also a related issue here, David, and it was brought up by the Australian Green Senator David Shoebridge, and he sent out a message calling for the release of David McBride. And David McBride is the whistleblower who revealed classified material that led to the allegations of war crimes against Ben Roberts-Smith. And David McBride was actually sent to jail for 5 years. And it's not a simple case of whether or if Ben Roberts-Smith is found guilty of war crimes, then David McBride will be automatically released. He was sent to jail for releasing national security documents, but the point is that he shouldn't be in jail in the first place. So exposing the truth so far has been the only crime in this case or this situation, and that will change if Roberts-Smith is found guilty. But the Attorney General, Michelle Rowland, she should release David McBride right now. You know, she's probably too busy being Duchess by the gambling lobby. That's a leftover from the time that she was the Minister of Communications. She's probably still got a few free tickets to the football from all of that. So it's clear that she's very busy with other things at the moment, David. But Monday morning, she should announce the release of David McBride. And if she's not prepared to do this, Anthony Albanese should force the issue.
And it's one of those issues too that it's a lot of the public aren't really aware of McBride. So it's not going to cost them any votes. And if they make too big a deal of it, it'll just harden what parts of the public aren't aware, make them aware and realise, hold on, if that happened to him, it could happen to me. So I would see really Mark Dreyfus should have, on the first day when they released the Biloela family, which was the right thing to do, he should have said, and I'm dropping the charges against Julian Assange, which they did eventually. And we're releasing McBride and Witness.
Oh, but Witness K, nothing has been done about that. Bernard Collaery was released. He was the lawyer associated with that case. He's been released.
Yeah. So McBride is now being a scapegoat for nothing. It's an appalling miscarriage of justice. And I don't think we should put up with it, Eddie.
Well, that's why we're talking about it. We shouldn't be putting up with it. But I guess overall, the upshot is the war is brutal. I think everyone knows that. But even within war, we've pointed this out quite a few times today, that there are still rules of engagement. But I think the bigger picture is, and we've talked about this as well, why does Australia keep following the United States into war? Vietnam a long time ago, Iraq, Afghanistan, and now Iran. There's 80 Australian personnel that have been actually part of the action by the United States. They're not actually in Iran, but they're part of this action against Iran in conjunction with the United States, even though Anthony Albanese and Penny Wong don't really want to talk about this very much. And I'd say that Ben Roberts-Smith is probably thinking about this same question too. Why do we always follow the United States into war? And the easy answer is that it's all about the alliance. It's things like AUKUS. It's that idea of shared values. And this is a theme that we've been running with for some time, David, but there needs to be more independent thinking and action coming in from Australia. It shouldn't be a case of America is at war, so Australia is at war. And as the song says, war is absolutely good for nothing. And Albo likes to be the DJ, so he should probably be playing that song more often next time he's on the DJ stage.
Yeah, given what he was known to play, I suspect he played a lot of Midnight Oil.
Well, he should be playing that as well.
Has changed a lot. I think too, it shows that there's again elements of the right that don't really understand the importance of the awards they give out. There was a lot of questions at the time, apparently, that how come Ben Roberts-Smith get the VC when there are so many equally as deserving people who don't get it? Now, partly that's the nature of the Victoria Cross. And most Victoria Cross winners accept it on behalf of all of those who didn't win, either they didn't make it back or their actions were unknown or what have you. Ben Roberts-Smith getting it was an unpopular decision by a lot of his colleagues by the looks of things. And it's like the Commander of the Order of Australia. It's so demeaned by the quality of people they've given it to that it means nothing. And the Victoria Cross shouldn't mean nothing. I suspect they won't give one out for decades, if ever again now, because it's been so tarnished, even by the allegations. And again, you hand this stuff out to your mates because they're your mates, not because they've earned it. You've diminished the award. And the supporters of Ben Roberts-Smith don't seem to get this, that the award is now pretty much worthless, which of course hurts I think it's all men, mostly men, who did a horrible job, got rewarded for it, and should have been allowed to just hold it as a thing that they did, with all the mixed emotions that brings with it. Now they're holding it through no fault of their own. They're holding a tarnished award because someone's ego was much bigger than the award was meant to contain. And I think we've lost something as Australians there.
That's it for this episode of New Politics. Thanks for listening in. And if you value independent journalism without the influence of corporate backing, join New Politics at newpolitics.com.au and support us directly. It's just $5 per month, and we always try to keep it very simple. If you like what we do, please send some support our way. It keeps our commitment to independent journalism ticking along. I'm Eddie Djokovic. Thanks for listening in, and it's goodbye to our listeners.
I'm David Lewis. We'll see you next time.